me about Taylor Swift. She's made about, I think it's like 100% more than some other artists that have come. I can't remember it. I was trying to find it. I was searching it up. I put it in.
Today's first episode of the Vice podcast, hosted by St.Elizabeth. Are you looking for a part-time job? So are we. Taxes, and even more tax-free saving accounts. Did Taylor Swift leave more than just lasting memories in Toronto? Find out all of this and more on today's episode of The FICE.
Cool. I'm going to introduce myself. I am Mr. Edgecombe. I run part of the business department at St. E's. Mr. Mansell, or do you go by Michael? What would you
I'm good either way. As in school, we can go Mr. Mansell.
Yep.
Yeah, I teach a little bit of business here and there, and I also teach some technology, depending on the year.
Awesome, that's great to hear. Welcome to our podcast. So this is the first introduction, our first episode of The Vice.
So there's a lot happening internationally, a lot of big events, and that'll move us into our next question. But a super big event that has hit Toronto recently is Taylor Swift. So did you know Taylor Swift was in town? I hear that it benefits Toronto's small business communities, and do you think it did, and in which ways?
Yeah, great question. So anytime an international celebrity, especially of that caliber, shows up, it's an ecosystem of jobs and fallout in a positive way that can come from that. So when Taylor Swift shows up, it's not just her immediate entourage of people, makeup, hair, etc. It's the people that come and spend money in our city. Maybe someone lives, like we have a very, GTA focus when we live here. But don't forget, just north of the city are a lot of community members that come here for big special events, sporting events, concerts. So they will absolutely make the trek. If they're a Swiftie and like, oh, my favorite artist is coming to Toronto, I am definitely going to drive in for the day or come in for the weekend. So I know that she did 2 concerts in Canada, one here, one in BC. So that's a pretty big scope. People can come from anywhere in this province, come check it out. They'll spend money, they'll stay for the weekend. So it absolutely has a ripple effect, okay? So it's called the multiplier in economics. But basically, hey, here's a little extra money showing up, and that's going to ripple to, I'm going to get more money, I'm going to give it to someone else, I'm going to spend more money in this city. So food, hotel, full ecosystem, clothing brands, you name it. Plus, it's the international stage. We're back in the news for a positive. Toronto has had ups and downs in news over the years, and this is a fantastic positive, okay? So yeah, definitely that's how I see it playing out. They know this. They anticipate international event, and they say, oh, for example, Olympics. We're trying to get the Olympics. We build infrastructure years and years early because we know people will show up. It's the old saying, if we build it, he will come. So we do this. We know they're on their way. So guess what? Let's prepare and be ready for it. Then it's established. That infrastructure will last 30, 40, 60 more years, depending on what we set up. So yeah, Swift, fantastic positive for the local community. Reestablishes us as a hub and international place to be.
Well, sir, that's amazing. There is a lot of great impact that she has made. But, on a personal level, have you even gotten a Swiftie bracelet?
I have not. I have not gotten a Swiftie bracelet.
Sir, I don't know if you could be talking about this. If you don't, do you have a favorite song?
Well, I'll tell you what. So my daughter had a phase where she loved Swift. So I heard all of these sort of songs, and her dance club was dancing to them. So I can say I'm not going to pick out a personal favorite because at first you like it, and then when you hear it multiple times, you're like, well, that was very good. I enjoyed it, but maybe to move on. But I'm not going to say in particular. I think she had an album 1989, which I thought was cool because it reflected, I guess, her birth year maybe, or an important year for her. And all of us bring that last year, the decade that we represent, and it's like this big moment for us, and especially when you make it. So you know what? I think it's for overall, the power she brings. And just knowing that she's got that sway, that her songs embody a particular theme, and I think she's done a fantastic job.
That's great. Great to hear. From all categories, in both the entertainment and the economic world here. Just reviewing some of the posts that Toronto's actually made so far. They say roughly about $282 million have been put into Toronto's local economy from just the days that she's been here, from her 6 concert days. It does get quite wild. When we do have those big celebrities coming to our GTA, our local area, and kind of helping influence our economy in such great ways for our small business and our local communities. A lot of my students have been coming to me recently, especially now that the Christmas season is coming around. A lot of them are looking to have some disposable income. whether it be for their families or for any of their friends that they're talking to. So in your opinion, what was your first part-time job? And these jobs, do you have any positions you would recommend for people, for students looking for their first-time position, or first part-time position at least? And if so, why?
Yeah, great question. So I did have a first part-time job while I was in high school. For me, I was just trying to get experience. I wasn't sure where I wanted to do. I was just looking for a job. So I got a job at a grocery store. Turned out best thing that ever happened to me. So I was a teenager in high school. One weird thing happened was when I got that job, my grades went from medium to much better. It made me more organized, made me have to get on track, which was key. But what I didn't realize was I was learning all these life skills that later on, it was a grocery store at the time, but it was life skills I kind of picked up along the way. A mentor showed up in the form of a manager named Al Douglas. Anyway, he was fantastic because he was the store manager. But the second, so my role specifically was pack groceries and push carts. Basic high school job. But the second we were busy, Saturday mornings was quiet, but Saturday afternoon it was lines, and there's people everywhere. People are trying to get out of the store. The first person to run and help us was Al Douglas, the manager of the store, making 10 times more than all of us, but he was a team player. And I thought, that's interesting. No job was above him. He was willing to help. He rolled his sleeves up and he got in there. I paid attention to that. Later in life, when I got other jobs, I thought, I'm going to try to be like that, put those around me first, and be a team player. So it kind of helped me that way. So I got some life skill out of it. More importantly, though, it forced me to speak to so many different people every day. You had to make small talk. Hey, how you doing? And the only real skill I had was my love for Tetris, because Tetris was packing these grocery bags, making it fit. And I was like, I love this. So people would come through, have a nice dialogue. It was a small town. You knew everyone. It was my friend's parent. It was my teacher. It was the principal. You got to know everyone. It was the doctors. But it was seeing Al and how he basically reinforced we're all a part of a team. We're all working together. So I could go on. 20 years later, I go into that store, and anyone I worked with is still there, still happy to be doing their thing.
That's great. Like I said, having a good manager like that always promotes a great work environment. And to have those great work environments also helps promote growth, not just for our students, but for anyone in those positions. Relating back to the Tetris thing you were saying, it's funny that you mentioned that. A lot of our students actually, Tetris is coming back in full swing, not just when it comes to Tetris, like you're saying, when it comes to packing boxes, but the actual game itself is making a return. A lot of my students have recently been playing it to just keep their minds focused. And if they need a little bit of break or something like that, Tetris is a great game to just get back into. Again, it really helps you focus, helps you think outside of the box, at the same time while being much more manageable in that sense, much more entry level.
Hey investors! Updates on this upcoming week's events include our JA Canada Investment Competition, which officially begins Monday, December 2nd, and will continue over the 6 weeks. Be sure to check your stocks. Go investors, go!
We talked a little bit about, having a part-time job and a couple of ways that, we may be gaining our money and we may be having a certain amount of money. But, especially at our age, there's a lot of stuff that maybe we want to buy or a lot of things that we want to do. We have college coming up or university coming up. So what would you recommend people under the age of 16? How should they start saving their money and when should they start saving money? And what do you think is the amount they should be saving per month?
Good question. So there's a lot of data and studies on this. How do I start saving? Where do I start? What do I do? If you're too young for your first job, your first official job, you're going to only really come into money special occasions. You're going to come into it.
Yeah, we actually have our earnings right here. According to the recent earnings for 2024, the average allowance or the average income for a 14-year-old is about $13 a month.
Right.
It's not too much to spend. Like I said, I can get you maybe one Starbucks drink as of right now.
Yeah.
Do you think this number is a bit too high or too low to even be answering a question along these lines?
No, it's fine, because what it does is not so much the number you bring in, it's the behavioral pattern you will establish. In other words, much more than, hey, $13, it's what am I going to do? And to answer Maddie's question, how much is a reasonable number? It's a percentage. So the golden rule is 10%. So if I'm making $13, $1.30, hey, I'm putting that somewhere safe. I'm going to put that where I can ensure it's safe. It sounds like not a huge amount of money, but you need a behavioral approach. So you're always going to be thinking in a certain way. It's the same thing for fitness. If you want to become fit, it's not like, what am I going to do? It's little chunks here, little chunks there that will add up over time. So your best bet is take that little bit of birthday money, your allowance money, take a chunk of it and put it away somewhere. I'm not sure if you're going to ask about sort of money over time, so I'll probably save that for later. But what I'll suggest is you put it somewhere safe, even a simple bank account, some kind of savings program.
Yeah, talking about that, actually, what we wanted to know, just from your perspective here, do you have any recommendation for any bank accounts or anything kids can start opening or at least start looking towards? I know you mentioned something about compounding, maybe exploring that, and then again, with any accounts or anything kids can look forward to, at least talk to their parents about slowly opening here.
Yeah, definitely. So the best thing I would suggest is take that little bit that comes in. Whatever the number is, put that chunk aside, your 10%. It doesn't sound like much, but again, it's that behavior you want to set up. That 10%, it goes somewhere special. There's an account that every institution is required by law to offer, known as a youth account. It's free, it gives you unlimited transactions, and it'll let you just have this account that you can put money in and use it up until you turn 18. So that is the best way to go. It's free. You can use it. If you want to set up a savings, then you're looking for something that's paying an interest rate that's typically higher than your checking account. It could be anywhere from 1% to 3%, depending on what's going on. I would just put your money in that initially. If you need money in the next couple of years, you could go into what's called a GIC, guarantee your investment, nothing's going to get lost. If you do not need your money in the next little while, you could totally wait till you're 18, but you can put it in some other options as well. So I would do, to sum up, you're looking at a pattern. You're not looking at a number. What's the pattern? I want to put aside a percentage because not everyone's making the same money as a kid. It's a percentage of the money I'm bringing in. Put that aside. That's the key.
What? Building off of that, sir, that's absolutely a really great point that we should be saving a certain amount and we should really be tracking how much we're saving in relation to how much we're receiving. But building off of kind of that, in today's society, especially in the media, there's so many new changes. A new iPhone's coming out every week. There's so many different clothing brands, so many different things that kids need and they want. So what's a good way to now start differentiating between that? Because especially in relation to saving, if we're saving for nothing, then how are we going to be able to track that progress?
Okay, so you do need rewards along the way. So the way we work as humans is we're sort of driven for pleasure, and we try to avoid pain. If you're just thinking of those terms, usually when you do something, you're motivated by avoiding the pain or gaining a pleasure. That's just what we're all about. So if you think about, if I'm saving money, you need to reward yourself along the way. If you just save, you're right, there may not be that particular golden holy grail that you've been holding out for. But the key here is that businesses will always position a new iPhone as you need this. This is what you need to have. And that's their goal. Your goal is to remind yourself, they're just trying to sell you a product. You don't need that particular product. My holy grail of what do I do? Do I need this item is, what did they have 100 years ago? Am I living a better life than they did? If I am, then I don't need it. Did they take a horse to school if they were rich? Yes. Did they walk to school? Probably. Do I have a car that works? I'm already winning. I don't need to keep up every month with what's the newest particular gadget. That's actually marketing that has tricked us into promoting their brands.
You know what? That's absolutely a great point. So many times, so many things will change. Different products will come. Different uses for things will come. But kind of building off that, in present day, we have the introduction of stuff like Apple Pay, Venmo, and very much tap and go kind of cards. So how do you think the convenience of having now these digital payments has made it harder to save? And do you think it has? Like, why or why not?
Yeah, great question. So it has. In fact, data shows that if you use tap and go, if this tap and go is connected to credit in any way, Visa card, MasterCard, American Express, any credit, you're going to spend more than if you walked into a store with cash. Some of the stats are staggering, upwards of 80% more. Some are more conservative, 30% more. However you get the statistic, you're spending more because of tap and go. Because it's out of sight, out of mind. It's so easy to click and I paid, click and it's again the reward we talked about already. I get the reward by clicking and moving on. So yeah, it's detrimental because if you enter into that behavioral pattern when you're young, as I already mentioned, life is patterns. If you establish that as that's who I am, that's how I'm going to operate, I'm trendy, I'm with it, I'm in, great, that's fantastic. But the way you purchase items will have a detrimental effect in midlife, and you'll consequently find out in later life you have less than people around you. It looks like they're winning, but everything is credit. Everything is borrowed. Nothing is owned anymore. 100 years ago, you had to buy and own it. So that's my benchmark. Hey, what were we doing 100 years ago? How do I reflect and have that to my perspective? You need a long-term perspective to make sense of this busy tap and go world.
Yeah, we do live in such a quick quick society in that sense. A lot of my students have actually not held money themselves just yet. They still have just gone immediately to having their Apple Wallet and paying through their phones or through any kind of device along those lines. So to stem off of that, in your opinion then, what should our kids or our students or our learners be looking for when opening up their first account? They should be looking at certain banks, certain areas, especially in Canada, having not as many options, or there's certain banks or something along those lines you would recommend opening to start off with?
Yeah, so generally there's 3 different phases, depending on the age you're at. But if you're like youth, like less than 10, you're just getting a youth account. Your parents or legal guardian should definitely establish an RESP. And there's a lot of interesting opinions out there, but it's free money. Yeah. It's free money. You should just open it up, get someone to give you a little bit of birthday money, put it in there, and the government will give you a percentage. You can get $500 free per year for all of these years when you're a youth up to 18, and you can use that compounding. That's basically a couple of years of free university. So that's the confusing part to me, but I definitely had many conversations over the years, and it turned into just a lack of financial literacy because they assumed there was all these strings attached to that money. No, there's not. There's a way to easily get it.
Well, that's a great segue. Our next question is brought up by one of our student leaders.
So what is a TFSA?
Okay, TFSA is a tax-free savings account introduced 2008. Basically, it just gives the opportunity for you, 2007, introduced 2007, integrated 2008, to put money into an account. Any interest you earn, any money that goes up, the government does not tax it, which is unique because all savings accounts are taxed. If I put money into a savings account and I made $20,000 in pure interest, that $20,000 gets taxed based on a bunch of factors, how much money I'm making, a bunch of other details. But this tax-free savings account that is eligible for all Canadians if you're 18 and older, it lets you earn money and the government will not tax it. There's 2 exemptions, but ultimately if you use it the way it's set up, you don't pay tax.
Okay, so if TFSAs are so beneficial, why doesn't everyone open an account?
So TFSAs have this sort of catch-22 because they're new, because financial literacy is passed through families. Usually you bank where your parents bank. By a quick show of hands, who banks where your parents banked? Usually it's it's pretty much everyone. So what happens is if a new product's introduced, there's a lot of hesitancy to get into it initially. And if you're coming from a place where, hey, things have worked for the last 30 years, we're not going to change them, people don't adopt new financial policy too easily. However, the government noticed this was not catching on. It was sort of certain groups only. The groups that had extra disposable income got into them. Not the people that would benefit the most. Those struggling to make ends meet, they didn't know this thing existed. So a marketing campaign was launched. It sort of became this known thing. But the lack of literacy around financial knowledge caused more problems than it was worth. The first year it came out, people did what's called an over-contribution. And if you do this, there's a number every year they establish that you're allowed to put in to a maximum. So this year, for example, it's $7,000.
Yeah, so we actually have the statistics, the annual for the TFSA. The dollar limit for 2024 is $7,000. It seems like the annual dollar is limited due to the current inflation of the economic system we live in. Do you think that it's a good time to invest right now?
Well, here's the thing, though. So let's go back to that problem. Is that if you do put $7,000 in, and you then take that money out, the issue is that if you put it back in, you're going to get penalized. You're going to get taxed. You are going to get taxed 1% on that outstanding amount. So part of their hesitancy for people to get this thing is they didn't use it right the first year. A lot of bad stories were released, and people had to spend extra money. So if it's used correctly, it's a product for every single Canadian. If you don't exceed that maximum contribution, everyone should have it. So to answer your question, why it's not necessarily being adopted by everybody, it's just that it was confusing the first year. People had to pay penalties the first year because it was not effectively educated to those. And only those with lots of disposable income are using it. So now back to Mr. Edge's next question of, hey, what's with this limiting factor of index to inflation? That's normal. It was $5,000 was the initial contribution number the first year it came out. And all they're doing with now moving it to $7 gradually over time was they're trying to keep up with inflation. So you're able to put money in there for your future for purposes. And what will happen is each year you put money in, it's supposed to give you keeping up hedging with inflation. 1 year it jumped to 10. So in other words, it was 5,000 one year, 5,000 another year, 5,500 another year. Then 1 year it just jumps to 10,000. So that the public thought that was really helping people with money rather than those that have no money. So there's a multi-factor approach of why I didn't catch on initially, but ultimately now it's pretty smooth. It works. You put your money in, you don't exceed your limit. You will not get penalized. You can make piles of money. The example I give is $5,000 contributed in the year 2008 in a company that had potential is now worth well over $1 million tax-free. That's only $5,000. If you put in 15, 20, 30, you do the metric, you do the math, you would be absolutely fine, tax-free money. All right?
So can you open up multiple TFSA accounts under the same name or registration?
You sure can. It's linked to your SIN number, your social insurance number. So what that means is you could open up one at, I'm not going to plug any banks, but you could open up one at your bank, one at your bank across the street, one at your neighbor's bank, as long as your total contribution does not exceed your allowable limit per year, you're fine. So if the limit is $7,000 this year, if I put 3 in one bank, 3 in another bank, I've got 1 left over I could put in at that third bank, as long as my total contribution does not exceed 7 for this year, if I am 18 this year. If I am older, if I had multiple years of subsequent carry forward, I'm up to 100,000 approximately this year I could be putting in.
Okay. Is that more beneficial?
Yeah, so beneficial maxing out is always recommended. The only time it's not is if you're a day trader. Then you get caught. You get caught with a day trading fee, and you also get taxed. If they look at it as a business, not a long-term investment vehicle, they'll tax you. So that is an issue.
Speaking about TFSAs, how do you recommend we educate ourselves about this? Do you recommend we read a paper book, or do we look at online articles? Or
So what I would say for trying to understand how they function, what they're all about, how do I learn about them, I always look at getting 3 different sources, and I actually kind of average out what I hear. So I'll hear something over here. I'll take out the sort of high answer, this sounds really amazing, and the low answer, that doesn't sound too good. I'll kind of find a middle ground to get my reference point. But I would actually start by walking into a bank, and there's a little trick. You walk into a bank, you're asked to speak with a financial advisor. The word advisor is tricky in this day and age. It's very political, but the word, there's a letter in there. If the advisor has the letter O, they're not regulated to have any financial knowledge whatsoever. But if it's a financial advisor, ER, they are required by law to have a bunch of financial knowledge. So I would say, can I speak to a financial advisor? A little trick of the trade. If you see they have that particular letter in their title, they've been certified, they've gone through the ropes. So I had to do investment funds in Canada, national reviews, all sorts of different knowledge-based, pass these tests to get the type of financial advisor I was for a decade. But if I wanted to just show up and get a job, I could do that with a financial advisor or title with no financial knowledge. So I would speak to someone like that. I would look online, and I would do some reading. I would look at the business articles day in, day out, and see what's available for me.
So talking a little bit more then about reading, do you have any books that you would recommend? We had a couple of books that we found online and a couple of resources, including the stock series.
Yeah, so there's a couple that I'd recommend. Here's the thing. There's a set of books you would definitely read when you're starting out. But there's a totally different set of books I would read once you've got some basic understanding. So there's one, the famous one. Everyone talks about The Wealthy Barber, which has been proven and disproven, but everyone seems to have an opinion on it. I would start with that particular book. It just talks in a nutshell about someone who didn't make a pile of money, but took a percentage of what they made and put it away and ended up pretty wealthy. So the principle makes sense, and it definitely holds true even in today's world. So I would start with that. There's a couple others that are on these recommended lists, but I would say it depends on your personality. Some people, they're looking at the investment side of things. Others are looking at the credit side of things. So it really depends where you're coming from, but Wealthy Barber I read. I went to the Institute of Canadian Bankers, and there's a huge list of books that are sourced and that are credible I'd consider looking at as well.
We also have our FLC Waterloo competition being held on December 5th during Period 3. Students are recommended to go through their resources and review Canadian financial policies for 2024. Make sure to check back on our Google Classroom for any additional information. Back to the podcast.
I've been talking to a lot of people, and they're very interested about crypto. So could you explain what crypto is?
Yeah, for sure. Crypto is a relatively new currency. The big thing with crypto is it's considered deregulated. It's not monitored by central bank so much per country. Like our currency, the Canadian currency, the American currency, has a regulatory body, a monetary policy that's controlling it and monitoring it. So cryptos are considered unregulated. They're a universal currency. They're global. There's not particular They can go anywhere, but what's unique about them is they're backed by this thing called the blockchain, this algorithmic code that says this is unique, it's trackable, and there's a finite number of these particular cryptos. Having said that, they're risky because online a lot of people will pump up a crypto, and what will happen is that cryptocurrency might not be what you think it is. It might not be there in 20 years. It might be worth a lot more. It might be worth a lot less. So you got to be careful. You got to educate yourself. There's more cryptos out there than you can imagine. The common ones, as we know.
So before we get into a little bit more specific, let's ask you a little bit of question. You seem to know so much about crypto, but have you ever tried investing or purchasing it?
So once upon a time, what happened was when crypto showed up, a friend of mine was into the crypto realm, and so I learned a little bit about it. Don't forget, I had to be financially regulated because I worked in a financial institution, so I had to learn about all the investment vehicles available to Canadians. So that was just one of those self-knowledge. Let's figure out what it is. I do happen to own some Ethereum, but not a huge amount, which is a type of crypto. It's one of those ones where it's a limited amount. You can purchase it, you can hold it, you can sell it. But what really and truly what it did was it opened my eyes to some stocks that deal in cryptocurrencies. So yeah, to answer your question, a little yeah.
You don't stand alone. About 6.8% of the world's population currently owns crypto, but at our age, it's a little bit different than what we see in banks and obviously with other forms of money. But do you think it's good to start investing crypto at our age? Are there any major restrictions that we're going to see?
Yeah, so investing crypto at your age, you will see restrictions. You'll see restrictions at any age. Some banks don't let you do it. Some banks, you go to buy cryptocurrencies, and they will restrict you. Some banks will let you do it, but it's not as convenient. So having said that, I'm not going to recommend any particular crypto, but what I would do is I would say do your research. Some of them have come and gone. Some of them have shown up, people have made a fortune, and people have left. I use an analogy from nature for crypto. So when you think about the Amazon River, think about the amazing diversity in that river. And I was there once, and we were warned, don't put your hands in the water. But if you think about a piranha, what happens is as soon as the animal has a little shred of blood and one piranha takes a bite, it's a feeding frenzy to everyone get their bite. And often crypto falls in the same way. As soon as someone starts selling it, you end up with a whole feeding frenzy, people selling, and this thing drops before you can really control it. So I would be cautious, definitely look into them.
Well, you know what? Sorry, one more thing.
Yep.
You're right, it is super vast, and just kind of like the Amazon rainforest, there's always going to be dangers, there's always going to be problems, so...
There's a lot of scams in crypto. According to the Motley Fool, $2.5 billion were lost to crypto scams last year.
Yep.
To people who are scared of investing in crypto due to these scams, what do you have to say to them?
Well, people that are scared about it, they're right to be scared. Decentralization means all this money that's been laundered needs to be dumped in the market somewhere, and it gets dumped into cryptos. So in the olden days, money laundering used to happen through casinos. People would take bad money, they did through bad criminal activities. They'd walk into a casino, they'd buy $100,000 worth of chips, they'd get their chips, they'd play for 2 minutes, and they'd cash out with $80,000 left over. But that 80 is now good quality, legitimate money. Cryptos is doing the same thing. All this bad money is coming from international places, who knows, who can't track it, buys cryptos and then sells it, but that causes a blip in the market. Market is driven by volume. Money comes in, market goes up, money goes out, market goes down. So you got to be cautious. There will always be a fraud when it's deregulated. That's what my recommendation is for overall investments are either consider the classic approaches, your GICs, your mutual fund or ETFs, and your stocks.
Thank you so much for coming on our FICE podcast. And if you have any closing remarks.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's great to share some financial knowledge with young people because that way when you're older, you'll already have a heads up. My closing remark is just simply to pay attention to not only how much you make, but what you do with your money as you go through life. And really to stop and ask yourself, just because everyone around me is buying that, do I actually need that? If I look back to 100 years ago, is my life better, yes or no? Do I need to really worry too much? I honestly want to say thank you to this fantastic school and this podcast, which is really going to reach a lot of students through different topics. Thank you.
Thank you, and FICE out.